Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. The crisp mountain air filled my lungs as I zipped up our tent. Caroline stood beside me, her blonde hair catching the last rays of sunlight. 10 years of marriage, and here we were, celebrating our anniversary in the heart of the Rocky Mountains. I hoped this trip would rekindle the spark that had been dimming between us lately. All set? I asked, giving the tent a final pat. Caroline nodded, a soft smile playing on her lips. It's beautiful out here, Bradley. Thank you for planning this. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. Anything for you, sweetheart. Happy anniversary. We stood there for a moment, taking in the breathtaking view of the mountains towering above us. The sky was a canvas of oranges and pinks, the sun sinking behind the peaks. Should we get the fire going? Caroline suggested, pulling away slightly. Good idea. Why don't you set up the chairs while I gather some wood? We moved about our campsite, falling into an easy rhythm. As I collected fallen branches, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This trip had been my idea, a way to reconnect away from the distractions of our daily lives. No cell phones, no work emails, just us and nature. By the time I returned with an armful of firewood, Caroline had set up our camping chairs and was rummaging through our cooler. Hungry, she called out as I approached. Starving, I replied, dropping the wood near our fire pit. What VE we got? Caroline held up a package of hot dogs and a bag of marshmallows. Gourmet camping cuisine, she said with a laugh. I chuckled, getting to work on the fire. Nothing but the best for my lady. As the flames grew, casting a warm glow over our little campsite, we settled into our chairs. Caroline passed me a roasting stick and a hot dog. Remember our first camping trip? I asked, extending my stick towards the fire. Caroline's eyes lit up with the memory. How could I forget? You nearly burned down half the forest trying to impress me with your fire-making skills. I feigned offense. Hey, I got it going eventually. After I showed you how, she teased, nudging my shoulder playfully. We laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet wilderness around us. This was nice, I thought. This was what we needed. As we ate our hot dogs and toasted marshmallows, we reminisced about the past 10 years. Our first date, the proposal, our wedding day. It felt good to remember why we fell in love in the first place. Do you ever wonder what our lives would be like if we hadn't met? Caroline asked suddenly, her voice soft. I turned to look at her, the firelight dancing across her features. Honestly, I can't imagine my life without you in it. She smiled, but there was something in her eyes I couldn't quite read. Sadness? Guilt? Before I could dwell on it, she leaned over and kissed me gently. I'm glad we're here, she whispered against my lips. As the night wore on, exhaustion from our hike earlier in the day began to set in. We doused the fire and crawled into our tent, snuggling close in our double sleeping bag. Good night, Bradley, Caroline murmured, her head resting on my chest. Good night, love, I replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I drifted off to sleep, feeling content and hopeful about our future together. Little did I know, my world was about to be turned upside down. In the depths of night, I was jolted awake by Caroline's restless movements. At first, I thought she was having a nightmare, but then I heard her mumbling something. Chris, oh Chris. My heart stopped. Chris? Who the hell was Chris? I lay there, frozen, straining to hear more. Don't stop, please. Caroline whimpered in her sleep. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I wanted to wake her, to demand answers, but fear kept me paralyzed. What if I was misunderstanding? What if this was all just a terrible misunderstanding? I barely slept for the rest of the night, my mind racing with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. By the time dawn broke, I had convinced myself that I was overreacting. It was probably nothing. It had to be nothing. But as I watched Caroline stir awake, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of my mind. A doubt that would soon shatter the life I thought we had built together. As the first light of dawn filtered through our tent, I lay awake, my mind still reeling from what I'd heard in the night. Caroline stirred beside me, her eyes fluttering open. Morning, she mumbled, a sleepy smile on her face. I forced a smile in return, trying to keep my voice steady. "Morning, sweetheart. Sleep well?" She stretched, nodding, like a log. "You?" The lie came easily to her lips, and it made my stomach churn. "Yeah, great," I lied back, unable to meet her eyes. Caroline sat up, running a hand through her tousled hair. "I'm going to go freshen up. Want to get the coffee started?" I nodded, grateful for the excuse to escape the confines of the tent. As soon as Caroline disappeared into the woods with her toiletry bag, I lunged for her phone, which lay forgotten by her pillow. My hands trembled as I picked it up, guilt and fear warring inside me. This wasn't like me. I'd never invaded Caroline's privacy before, but the memory of her sleep talking haunted me. I navigated to her messages, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure she'd hear it from wherever she was. And there it was, right at the top of her recent conversations. "Chris?" With a deep breath, I tapped on the name. Immediately, my world crumbled around me. The screen filled with messages, each one more damning than the last. Explicit photos, intimate conversations, plans for secret meetups. My vision blurred as I scrolled through months of betrayal. "Hey babe, missing you already. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. Our work meetings are the highlight of my week. God, Caroline, you drive me crazy. If only your husband knew what a wildcat you really are." Each message was like a punch to the gut. I felt sick, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. But I couldn't stop reading, couldn't stop torturing myself with the evidence of my wife's infidelity. In a daze, I took screenshots, sending them to my own phone. I needed proof. I needed something tangible to hold on to as my world fell apart. Just as I finished, I heard Caroline's footsteps approaching. I quickly placed her phone back where I'd found it and stumbled out of the tent, desperate for fresh air. "Bradley? You okay?" Caroline's voice came from behind me, concern lacing her words. I turned to face her, struggling to keep my composure. How could she stand there, looking at me with those loving eyes, when she'd been betraying me for God knows how long? "Yeah," I managed to croak out, "just feeling a bit queasy. Probably something I ate." Caroline frowned, reaching out to touch my arm. I flinched involuntarily, and hurt flashed across her face. "Are you sure? We can pack up and head home if you're not feeling well." Part of me wanted to confront her right there, to scream and rage and demand answers. But a colder, more calculating part held me back. I needed time to think, to plan. "No, no," I said, forcing a smile. "I'll be fine. Let's have some breakfast and enjoy our last day here." Caroline nodded, still looking concerned. "Okay, if you're sure. I'll get the stove going for coffee." As she busied herself with breakfast preparations, I sat heavily in one of our camping chairs, my mind whirling. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? "Here," Caroline's voice broke through my thoughts as she handed me a steaming mug of coffee. "Thanks," I muttered, taking a sip. The bitter liquid did nothing to wash away the taste of betrayal in my mouth. "So, what do you want to do today?" Caroline asked, settling into the chair next to mine. "We could go for another hike, or just relax here at the campsite." I shrugged, unable to muster any enthusiasm. "Whatever you want." She frowned again, reaching out to touch my forehead. "Are you sure you're okay? You seem off." I caught her hand before it could make contact, squeezing it perhaps a bit too tightly. "I'm fine, Caroline. Just tired, I guess." She pulled her hand back, a flicker of something, guilt, fear, passing across her face. "Okay, well, why don't we just take it easy today? We can pack up after lunch and head home a bit early if you're not feeling up to staying." I nodded, relief washing over me at the thought of ending this farce of an anniversary trip. "Yeah, that sounds good." The rest of the morning passed in a haze. I went through the motions, helping Caroline clean up our campsite and pack our gear. All the while, my mind raced with questions and plans. Who was this Chris? How long had they been seeing each other? And what was I going to do about it? As we loaded the last of our camping equipment into the car, Caroline turned to me with a smile that now seemed false and hollow. This was nice, wasn't it? Getting away from everything, just the two of us? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. If only she knew the irony of her words. As we pulled away from the campsite, leaving behind the beautiful mountain scenery, I felt a chapter of my life closing. The man who had arrived here full of hope and love was gone. In his place was someone harder, colder, determined to uncover the full extent of his wife's betrayal and make her pay for it. Little did Caroline know, as she chatted happily about future plans and shared memories, that her carefully constructed world of lies was about to come crashing down around her. The drive back home was an exercise in self-control. Caroline chattered away, seemingly oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles turning white as I fought to keep my emotions in check. "Remember that little Italian place we passed on the way up?" Caroline was saying. "We should try it sometime. Maybe for our next date night?" I grunted non-committally, my mind elsewhere. How many of our date nights had she used as cover for her rendezvous with Chris? Bradley? Caroline's voice cut through my thoughts. "Are you listening?" I forced myself to relax my grip on the wheel, plastering on what I hoped was a convincing smile. "Sorry, love. Just concentrating on the road. What were you saying?" She sighed, a hint of frustration in her voice. "I was talking about our plans for next month. The Johnsons invited us over for their barbecue, remember?" "Right, yeah," I muttered, the idea of socializing feeling absurd given what I now knew. "Sounds great." Caroline fell silent for a moment, and I could feel her eyes on me. "Are you sure you're okay? You've been quiet ever since we left the campsite." I shrugged, keeping my eyes on the road. "Just tired, I guess. And you know how I get after camping trips. Always takes me a while to readjust to civilization." She seemed to accept this explanation, reaching over to pat my thigh. I fought the urge to flinch away from her touch. "Well, we're almost home. You can have a nice, hot shower and relax on the couch. I'll even cook dinner tonight," she offered. The kindness in her voice made my stomach churn. How could she be so caring, so seemingly devoted, when she'd been living a double life? As we pulled into our driveway, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Home, our home, the place we'd built our life together, now tainted by her betrayal. "I'll start unpacking," Caroline said as we got out of the car. "Why don't you go inside and freshen up?" I nodded, grabbing my phone and heading inside. As soon as I was alone, I pulled up the screenshots I'd taken of Caroline's messages with Chris. My hands shook as I scrolled through them again, the reality of the situation hitting me anew. I needed more information. Who was this Chris? How long had this been going on? I needed answers before I confronted Caroline. With a deep breath, I opened my laptop and began my investigation. It didn't take long to find Chris on social media. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized him. He worked with Caroline. There were even photos of company events where Caroline and I had both attended, Chris lurking in the background. How many times had they exchanged secret glances right under my nose? How many late nights at the office had been spent in each other's arms? The sound of the front door opening jolted me from my research. I quickly closed my laptop as Caroline walked in, her arms full of camping gear. "A little help?" she called out, a teasing lilt to her voice. I got up, moving to take some of the equipment from her. As our hands brushed, I felt a jolt of pain and anger. This woman, who I'd loved and trusted for 10 years, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. "Thanks," Caroline said, oblivious to my inner turmoil. "I'll go grab the rest. Why don't you start sorting through what needs to be washed?" I nodded mutely, watching her walk back out to the car. As soon as she was gone, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to my best friend, Tom. "Need to talk. It's urgent. Can we meet tomorrow?" Tom's reply came almost immediately. "Sure, mate. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. Nothing was okay. My entire world had been turned upside down in the span of a day. "I'll explain tomorrow." I finally typed back. "Let's meet at Joe's Cafe around noon." With that arranged, I turned my attention back to the camping gear, mechanically sorting through it as Caroline made trips back and forth from the car. "I think that's everything," she announced finally, closing the front door behind her. "God, I'm exhausted. Mind if I grab the first shower?" "Go ahead," I said, not meeting her eyes. "I'll get started on the laundry." Caroline paused, and I could feel her gaze on me. Bradley, are you sure everything's all right? You've been acting strange since this morning. I forced myself to look at her, to meet those eyes that had once held my entire world. I'm fine, Caroline. Just tired. Go have your shower. She hesitated for a moment longer before nodding and heading upstairs. As soon as I heard the bathroom door close, I let out a shaky breath. How was I going to get through this? How could I sit across from her at dinner, sleep beside her in our bed, knowing what I knew? But I had to. I needed time to gather more information, to plan my next move. Caroline had played me for a fool for who knows how long. Now it was my turn to play a part. As I heard the shower start upstairs, I moved back to my laptop, determined to uncover every detail of Caroline's betrayal. And as I did, a plan began to form in my mind. A plan that would not only expose Caroline's infidelity, but would make her feel the full weight of her actions. Little did she know, as she washed away the dirt from our camping trip, that her carefully constructed world of lies was about to come crashing down around her. And I would be the one to bring it all tumbling down. The next day, I found myself sitting in Joe's cafe, my hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. My mind was still reeling from the events of the past 24 hours. The cafe buzzed with the usual lunchtime crowd, but I barely noticed them. My eyes were fixed on the door, waiting for Tom to arrive. Right on cue, Tom walked in, his familiar lanky frame easy to spot. He scanned the room, his brow furrowing when he caught sight of me. I must have looked as bad as I felt. "Bradley, mate," Tom said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You look like hell. What's going on?" I took a deep breath, trying to figure out where to start. "Tom, I don't even know how to say this." Tom leaned forward, concern etched on his face. "Just spit it out, man. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling slightly as I pulled up the screenshots. "It's Caroline," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She's been cheating on me." Tom's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? No way. Caroline? Are you sure?" I nodded, sliding the phone across the table. "See for yourself." Tom picked up the phone, his face growing more serious with each swipe. "Jesus, Bradley. I don't know what to say. How did you find out?" I recounted the events of the camping trip, my voice hollow as I described Caroline's sleep-talking and my subsequent discovery. Tom listened intently, his expression a mix of shock and anger. "That bitch," he muttered, shaking his head. "I can't believe she'd do this to you. What are you going to do?" I leaned back in my chair, running a hand through my hair. "That's why I called you. I have an idea, but I need your help." Tom's eyebrows shot up. "My help? What do you mean?" "You're still part of that local theater group, right?" I asked, leaning forward. Tom nodded slowly. "Yeah, why?" "I want to expose her," I said, my voice low and intense. "Not just to me, not just to our friends. I want everyone to know what she did." Tom's eyes widened. "Bradley, mate, I know you're hurting, but are you sure that's the best?" I cut him off, my words tumbling out in a rush. "I want to put on a play that shows exactly what she did, what they both did. I want Caroline and Chris to sit there and watch as their dirty little secret is acted out for everyone to see." Tom was silent for a long moment, studying my face. That's pretty intense, Bradley. Are you sure you want to go through with something like that?" I nodded, my jaw set. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. "Will you help me?" Tom sighed, running a hand over his face. "All right, I'm in. But Bradley, promise me you'll think this through. Revenge might feel good in the moment, but—" "I have thought it through," I interrupted. "Every second since I found out. This isn't just about revenge, Tom. It's about justice. It's about showing Caroline and Chris that they can't just stomp all over people's lives and get away with it." Tom held up his hands in surrender. Okay, I get it. So, what's the plan?" I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "Here's what I'm thinking." For the next hour, Tom and I huddled over our coffee cups, plotting and planning. We hashed out the broad strokes of the play, deciding how to present Caroline and Chris's affair in a way that would be unmistakable to them, but not so obvious that it would tip them off before the big reveal. We'll need to be careful with the casting, Tom mused. We want actors who can capture their essence without being dead ringers. I nodded. And the script needs to be perfect. It has to hit all the right notes without being too on the nose. Tom pulled out a notebook and started jotting down ideas. We could frame it as a modern retelling of a classic story, something about infidelity and betrayal. That way, we have some plausible deniability if anyone gets suspicious. Good thinking, I agreed. And we'll need to come up with a way to get Caroline and Chris there. Some kind of community event, maybe? As we continued to brainstorm, I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread building in my chest. This plan was audacious, potentially disastrous, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was exactly what I needed to do. Tom, I said, interrupting his flow of ideas. Thank you for this. I know it's asking a lot. Tom reached across the table, clasping my shoulder. That's what friends are for, mate. Caroline might have betrayed you, but you're not alone in this. We'll make sure justice is served. As we left the cafe, our heads buzzing with plans and possibilities, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since that fateful night in the tent. Caroline had no idea what was coming, but soon, very soon, her world would come crashing down around her, and I would be there to watch it burn. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Tom had rallied his theater group, presenting our idea as a daring, avant-garde production. To my surprise and relief, they embraced the concept with enthusiasm. All right, everyone, Tom called out, clapping his hands to get the group's attention. We were gathered in the community center's main hall, scripts clutched in hand. Let's run through Act 1 again. Remember, we want to hint at the affair without making it too obvious. I watched from the back of the room as the actors took their places. The woman playing the Caroline character we'd named her Carla in the play stepped forward. "Oh, David," she crooned to her co-star. "I simply must work late again tonight. These reports won't file themselves, you know." The Bradley character, renamed Ben, looked crestfallen. "But honey, it's our anniversary. I thought we could have a special dinner." I felt a twinge in my chest, remembering similar conversations with Caroline. How many times had she fed me the same lies? Cut. Tom's voice rang out. "Great job, guys. But let's amp up the subtext a bit. Carla, maybe you could be a little more eager about working late? And Ben, let's see more suspicion in your eyes." As they reset the scene, Lisa, one of the other actors, sidled up to me. "This is some heavy stuff, Bradley. Are you sure you're okay watching this?" I nodded, keeping my eyes on the stage. "I have to be. It's the only way I'll get through this." Lisa squeezed my arm sympathetically before moving back to her position. The scene started again, and this time, I could see the subtle changes. Carla practically bounced with excitement at the prospect of working late, while Ben narrowed his eyes, doubt creeping into his expression. "Better," Tom called out. "Now, let's move on to the office scene. Dan, you're up." The actor playing Chris's character strode onto the stage, a confident smirk on his face. "Carla, darling," he purred, "those reports can wait. I have something much more pressing to discuss with you." I clenched my fists, the familiar rage bubbling up inside me. Seeing their affair played out like this, even by actors, made it all feel real again. "You okay, mate?" Tom murmured, appearing at my side. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to relax. "Yeah, I'm fine. It's just intense." Tom nodded understandingly. "We can take a break if you need." "No," I said firmly. "Keep going. It needs to be perfect." For the next few hours, we fine-tuned each scene, tweaking dialogue and adjusting blocking. The actors threw themselves into their roles, clearly relishing the drama of it all. "All right, everyone," Tom announced as the sun began to set outside. "Great work today. Remember, we're not just putting on a play here. We're serving justice. Let's keep that energy up for tomorrow's rehearsal." As the actors filed out, chattering excitedly about the production, Tom approached me. "So, what do you think? Are we on the right track?" I nodded slowly, my mind racing with everything I'd seen. "It's good. Really good. But what?" Tom pressed. "We need something more," I said, an idea forming. Something that'll really drive the point home? Tom raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the screenshots I'd taken of Caroline's messages. What if, at the end of the play, we projected some of these on a screen? Not the explicit ones, but enough to make it clear that this isn't just fiction. Tom's eyes widened. Bradley, that's pretty hardcore. Are you sure you want to go that far? I met his gaze, my resolve firm. They went that far when they decided to betray me. Why shouldn't I do the same? Tom was quiet for a moment, then nodded. All right, if that's what you want, we'll make it happen. But Bradley, promise me something. What's that? Promise me you won't lose yourself in this revenge plot. The Bradley I know is better than that. I felt a flicker of doubt, but pushed it aside. I'm still me, Tom. I'm just giving Caroline and Chris what they deserve. As I left the community center that night, my head was spinning with plans and possibilities. The play was taking shape, becoming more than just a vague idea of revenge. It was becoming real, tangible. And soon, very soon, Caroline and Chris would feel the full weight of their actions. I just had to stay strong, stay focused, and see this through to the end. Little did I know, the hardest part was yet to come. The day had finally arrived. After weeks of intense rehearsals and meticulous planning, it was time to set the final phase of our plan in motion. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie with trembling hands. The man staring back at me looked older, harder than he had just a few weeks ago. My phone buzzed on the dresser. It was a text from Tom. Everything's set. You ready for this? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. As ready as I'll ever be, I typed back. Downstairs, I found Caroline in the kitchen, sipping her morning coffee. She looked up as I entered, a smile on her face that now seemed false, hollow. Morning, honey, she chirped. You're looking sharp today. Big meeting? I forced a smile, hating how easy it was becoming to lie to her. Something like that. Actually, I have a surprise for you. Caroline's eyebrows shot up. A surprise? What kind of surprise? I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket, sliding it across the kitchen island towards her. I've been working on a little project with Tom and his theater group. We're putting on a play this weekend, and I'd love for you to be there. Caroline picked up the envelope, her eyes lighting up with genuine excitement. The sight made my stomach churn. Bradley, that's wonderful. I had no idea you were interested in theater. I shrugged, trying to keep my voice casual. It's something new I wanted to try. Will you come? It would mean a lot to me. She was already nodding enthusiastically. Of course. I wouldn't miss it for the world. What's the play about? I hesitated for a moment, choosing my words carefully. It's a modern take on betrayal and consequences. I think you'll find it enlightening. If Caroline noticed anything odd in my tone, she didn't show it. She was too busy examining the invitation. This Saturday? Perfect. I don't have any plans. Oh, can I invite some friends from work? They'd love this. My heart raced at the mention of her work friends. This was the opening I'd been waiting for. Actually, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I've already invited Chris and his family. I thought it would be nice to have some of your colleagues there. For a split second, I saw something flicker in Caroline's eyes. Fear? Guilt? But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Oh, she said, her voice slightly higher than normal. That's thoughtful of you. I'm sure Chris will appreciate the invite. I nodded, turning away to pour myself a coffee, using the moment to compose myself. When I turned back, Caroline was typing furiously on her phone. Just letting Chris know about the invitation, she said, a little too quickly, in case he didn't see it yet. Of course, I replied, raising my mug in a mock toast. Wouldn't want him to miss out. As I left for work, my mind was racing. The trap was set. Now all that remained was to spring it. Throughout the day, I received a flurry of texts from Tom, updating me on the final preparations. Costumes are ready. Tech rehearsal went smoothly. Projectors all set up for the big reveal. With each message, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread building in my chest. This was really happening. There was no turning back now. That evening, as Caroline and I sat down to dinner, she couldn't stop talking about the upcoming play. I'm so excited to see what you and Tom have put together, she gushed. You know, I always thought you had a creative side you weren't exploring. I nodded, pushing my food around my plate. It's been an enlightening experience, that's for sure. Caroline reached across the table, taking my hand. I'm proud of you, Bradley, for trying something new, for putting yourself out there. I looked at her hand on mine, remembering all the times I'd found comfort in her touch. Now, it took every ounce of willpower not to pull away. Thanks, I managed to say. I just hope everyone enjoys the show. As we cleared the table, Caroline's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, a small frown creasing her forehead. Everything okay? I asked, knowing full well it wasn't. She nodded, a little too quickly. Oh yes. Just Chris confirming he and his family can make it to the play. That was nice of him to let me know. I turned away, ostensibly to load the dishwasher, but really to hide the grim smile that threatened to spread across my face. That's great, I said. The more, the merrier. Later that night, as Caroline slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. In just a few days, everything would change. The life we'd built together, the trust I'd thought we shared, it would all come crashing down. Part of me wanted to call it off, to find another way to confront Caroline about her infidelity. But then I remembered the messages, the photos, the casual way she'd lied to my face day after day. No, there was no going back now. The play would go on, and Caroline and Chris would finally face the consequences of their actions. As I drifted off into an uneasy sleep, my last thought was of the audience on opening night, watching as the truth unfolded before their eyes. And at the center of it all would be Caroline and Chris, their secret exposed for all to see. The stage was set. The actors were ready. All that remained was for the curtain to rise on the performance of a lifetime. The community hall buzzed with anticipation. I stood at the back, my heart pounding as I watched friends, family, and colleagues file in. Caroline sat near the front, chatting animatedly with a group of her work friends. My eyes narrowed as I spotted Chris and his family a few rows behind her. Tom appeared at my side, his face etched with concern. Last chance to back out, mate. Are you sure about this? I nodded, my jaw set. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the audience. Tom squeezed my shoulder before heading backstage. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. The curtain rose, revealing a set that mirrored our living room. The actress playing Carla, the Caroline character, lounged on the couch, phone in hand. "Oh, darling," she called out in a sing-song voice. "I'm afraid I'll have to work late again tonight. These reports won't file themselves." The actor playing Ben, my character, entered, looking dejected. "But honey, it's our anniversary. I thought we could have a special dinner." I watched Caroline's reaction from the corner of my eye. She was leaning forward, a slight frown creasing her brow. As the play progressed, the affair between Carla and Dan, the Chris character, unfolded in exaggerated, almost farcical detail. The audience laughed at the over-the-top performances, but I noticed Caroline and Chris growing increasingly uncomfortable. During a particularly revealing scene, I overheard Caroline whispering to her friend, "This is oddly specific, don't you think?" Her friend shrugged. "It's probably just a coincidence. These stories are pretty common in plays." I smirked to myself. If only they knew. The tension in the room grew as the play reached its climax. Ben discovered Carla's infidelity, confronting her and Dan in a dramatic scene that had the audience on the edge of their seats. "How could you?" the actor playing me shouted. "I trusted you. I loved you." Carla fell to her knees, sobbing dramatically. "I'm sorry. It meant nothing, I swear." I glanced at Caroline again. She was pale, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests of her chair. Chris, a few rows back, looked like he might be sick. As the final scene drew to a close, I made my way to the side of the stage. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was firm. The moment of truth had arrived. The audience burst into applause as the actors took their bows. Tom stepped out from behind the curtain, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. We hope you enjoyed our little production, but the show isn't quite over yet. We have a special guest who'd like to say a few words. Bradley, would you come up here, please? A confused murmur rippled through the crowd as I climbed the steps to the stage. Caroline's eyes widened in shock as I took the microphone from Tom. Thank you all for coming tonight. I began, my voice steadier than I felt. I hope you enjoyed the play. But as Tom said, we're not quite finished. You see, this wasn't just a random story we decided to tell. It's my story. Our story. I locked eyes with Caroline, watching as the color drained from her face. Caroline, Chris, I think it's time we had a little chat, don't you? The community hall fell silent as I stood center stage, all eyes fixed on me. Caroline looked like she might faint, while Chris seemed to be searching for the nearest exit. I know what you've been doing, I said, my voice echoing through the hall. The late nights at the office, the secret text messages, the lies. I know everything. Caroline stood up, her voice shaky. Bradley, what are you talking about? This is crazy. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is it, Caroline? Is it really so crazy? Tom, if you would. On cue, Tom activated the projector. The screen behind me lit up with the damning evidence I'd gathered. Text messages, photos, hotel receipts. Each one a nail in the coffin of my marriage. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience. Chris's wife let out a strangled sob, while their children looked around in confusion. Bradley, please, Caroline pleaded, tears streaming down her face. We can talk about this. You don't have to do this. I shook my head, my voice cold. We're well past talking, Caroline. You had plenty of chances to talk, to confess, to end it, but you didn't. You just kept lying day after day. Chris finally found his voice, standing up with his hands raised. Look, man, I know you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle this. Think about what you're doing. I turned my gaze to him, feeling a surge of anger. Oh, I've thought about it, Chris. I've thought about nothing else for weeks. Did you think about what you were doing when you were sleeping with my wife? Chris's wife stood up, her face a mask of pain and fury. You bastard, she screamed, slapping Chris hard across the face. How could you do this to us? To our children? The hall erupted into chaos. People were shouting, crying, demanding explanations. Through it all, I stood on stage, watching as the lives of those who had betrayed me crumbled before my eyes. That's not all, I said, raising my voice to be heard over the din. I've already sent all of this evidence to your company's HR department. I imagine you'll both be getting some interesting calls on Monday morning. Caroline collapsed back into her seat, her head in her hands. Chris looked like he might be sick. Bradley, Tom murmured from beside me. Maybe that's enough. I think they get the point. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I want everyone here to know exactly what kind of people Caroline and Chris are. The kind who can look you in the eye and lie without hesitation. The kind who can destroy a family without a second thought. I turned to Caroline, feeling a mix of anger and sorrow. I loved you, Caroline. I trusted you. And this is how you repay that trust? By throwing away 10 years of marriage for what? A cheap thrill with a coworker? Caroline looked up at me, her makeup streaked with tears. It wasn't like that, Bradley. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I love you. Please, can't we talk about this? I shook my head, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. There's nothing left to talk about, Caroline. I've already filed for divorce. You'll be hearing from my lawyer soon. With that, I handed the microphone back to Tom and walked off the stage. As I made my way through the stunned audience, I heard Caroline calling after me, begging me to stop, to listen. But I kept walking, pushing through the doors and out into the cool night air. Behind me, I could hear the chaos continuing in the hall. But for the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. The truth was out. The lies were exposed. And now, finally, I could start to move on. The days following the play were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. I holed up an hour, my house, fielding calls from concerned friends and family, dodging reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the dramatic reveal. Caroline had tried to come home that night, but I'd changed the locks. She'd stood on the porch, sobbing and pleading, but I'd remained firm. There was no going back now. A week after the play, I sat in my lawyer's office, going over the divorce proceedings. The evidence I'd gathered made it a pretty straightforward case. Given the circumstances, my lawyer, Sarah, explained, we're in a strong position to push for a favorable settlement. Caroline's infidelity and the public nature of the reveal work in our favor. I nodded, feeling oddly detached from it all. I just want it over with, Sarah. I don't care about the money. I just want to move on. Sarah leaned forward, her expression softening. I understand, Bradley, but you need to think about your future. The divorce settlement can help secure that future. As we wrapped up our meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from Tom. You see the news? I frowned, quickly pulling up a local news site. My heart sank as I saw the headline. Local man's theatrical revenge goes viral. Looks like your play is getting more attention than we anticipated, Sarah said, peering at my phone. This could complicate things. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Great, just what I needed. As I left Sarah's office, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I answered anyway. Is this Bradley? A woman's voice asked. Yes, who's this? This is Melissa from Channel 5 News. We'd love to have you on our evening broadcast to discuss the recent events. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly. This was getting out of control. When I got home, I found Caroline sitting on the front steps, looking haggard and defeated. Bradley, she said, standing up as I approached. Please, can we talk? I know I don't deserve it, but please, just give me 5 minutes. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to walk inside and leave her out in the cold. But another part, a part one thought had died the night I discovered her betrayal, felt a twinge of sympathy. 5 minutes, I said, my voice gruff. That's all you get. We sat at the kitchen table, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words and broken trust. I'm sorry, Caroline finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know that doesn't begin to cover it, but I am. I never meant for any of this to happen. I laughed bitterly. Never meant for it to happen? What? Did you trip and fall onto Chris's dick? Caroline flinched at my words. I deserve that. I deserve all of it. But Bradley, you have to believe me when I say I love you. What happened with Chris, it was a mistake. A stupid, terrible mistake. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk at the store, Caroline, I said, my voice cold. What you did, that was a choice. A series of choices. You chose to betray me, to lie to me, day after day. Tears welled up in Caroline's eyes. I know, and I'll regret those choices for the rest of my life. But please, Bradley, isn't there any way we can work through this? 10 years of marriage, doesn't that mean anything? I stood up, unable to bear the sight of her tears any longer. It meant everything to me, Caroline. That's why this hurts so much. But it's over. You killed whatever we had the moment you decided to sleep with Chris. Caroline broke down then, sobbing uncontrollably. Despite everything, I felt a pang in my chest. I'd loved this woman for so long, but that love had been poisoned, tainted by her betrayal. I think you should go, I said quietly. The divorce papers will be ready soon. Please don't make this any harder than it needs to be. As Caroline left, still crying, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, anger, and underneath it all, a glimmer of hope. Hope that someday, somehow, I'd be able to move past this and find happiness again. Little did I know, that journey was just beginning. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings, dodged phone calls, and sleepless nights. The story of my theatrical revenge had indeed gone viral, turning me into an unlikely internet celebrity overnight. Bradley, you've got to see this, Tom said one afternoon, thrusting his phone in my face. You're trending on Twitter. #RevengePlay is all over the place. I groaned, pushing the phone away. Great, just what I needed. More attention. Tom sat down next to me, his expression serious. Look, mate, I know this isn't what you wanted, but maybe it's not such a bad thing. People are talking about infidelity, about trust. You've started a conversation. I shook my head, feeling suddenly tired. I didn't want to start a conversation, Tom. I just wanted. I don't know. Justice, I guess. And did you get it? Tom asked softly. I thought about Caroline's tear-stained face, about Chris's public humiliation, about the chaos I'd unleashed that night at the community hall. Had it been worth it? I don't know, I admitted. Sometimes I think I went too far. Other times I feel like I didn't go far enough. Tom clapped me on the shoulder. That's normal, mate. You've been through a trauma. It's going to take time to process it all. As the dust began to settle, I found myself focusing on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into work, took up new hobbies, reconnected with old friends. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. One Saturday morning, as I was leaving my favorite coffee shop, I quite literally ran into someone. "Oh, I'm so sorry," a woman's voice said as hot coffee splashed across my shirt. I looked up, ready to brush off the apology, when I met the most striking pair of green eyes I'd ever seen. No, it's my fault," I stammered, suddenly feeling like a teenager again. I wasn't looking where I was going. The woman smiled, and I felt my heart skip a beat. "Let me buy you another coffee to make up for it. I'm Rachel, by the way." "Bradley," I replied, shaking her outstretched hand. "And you don't have to do that. It's just a shirt." Rachel's smile widened. "I insist. Besides, it'll give me a chance to get to know the famous #RevengePlay guy." I groaned inwardly. "You've heard about that?" She nodded, her expression softening. "I have. And for what it's worth, I think you were incredibly brave. It couldn't have been easy to expose something so personal like that." As we sat down with fresh coffees, I found myself opening up to Rachel in a way I hadn't with anyone since the whole ordeal began. She listened without judgment, offering words of encouragement and understanding. "You know," she said as we finished our coffees, "my ex-husband cheated on me too. I didn't have the courage to do what you did, but I wish I had. It's important to stand up for yourself, to show the world that you won't be a doormat." I felt a warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Thank you, Rachel. That means a lot." As we exchanged numbers and said our goodbyes, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope for the future. Hope for new beginnings. The next few months flew by. The media frenzy around my story eventually died down, replaced by the next viral sensation. Caroline and I finalized our divorce, and while it was painful, it was also freeing. I heard through the grapevine that she and Chris had both lost their jobs, their reputations in tatters. Part of me felt guilty, but a larger part felt vindicated. Rachel and I started dating, taking things slow and building a foundation of trust and honesty. She understood my hesitation, my moments of doubt, and she stood by me through it all. One evening, as we walked hand in hand through the park, Rachel turned to me with a serious expression. "Bradley," she said, squeezing my hand, "I want you to know how proud I am of you. You've been through hell, but you've come out the other side stronger. You didn't let what Caroline did define you." I felt a lump form in my throat. I couldn't have done it without you, without Tom, and all the others who stood by me. Rachel smiled, leaning in to kiss me softly. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, but I'm glad I could be there for you." As we continued our walk, I realized something. The pain of Caroline's betrayal was still there, a dull ache in my chest. But it no longer consumed me. It no longer defined me. I had taken control of my narrative, exposed the truth, and come out the other side. And while the journey had been painful, it had also led me here, to this moment, with a woman who valued honesty and loyalty as much as I did. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free and was excited for the future, whatever comes next. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.